The November PPACG Board of Directors meeting. We do have a quorum. Begin with introductions. I am Dennis Heisey, El Paso County Commissioner. And to my left,
Mark Snyder, Mayor, Manitou Springs.
Rob McDonald, PPACG.
Joe Glenn, El Paso County Commissioner.
Keith McCaffrey, Mayor, Town of Remo.
Travis Easton, Mayor Monument.
Don Knight, Colorado Springs City Council.
Joel Miller, Colorado Springs City Council.
Tom Rona, CDOT Region Director.
Jim Moore, Military Affairs Council.
Wayne Williams, El Paso County Clerk and Recorder.
Wayne, why are you here? You have votes to be counting.
He's got a good stat.
2 points. First, we stayed till 4:45 in the morning and got it done on election night. Unlike many other counties that it was a day later that they finished. Second, I can't count any more ballots till 5 p.m. tonight when the military ballots and the signature corrections are due. So, Mark, you were not officially elected yet, despite having 100% of the vote.
I'm out.
The canvas has not yet been completed, but I think your odds are good. Just saying.
Norm Steentiller County Commissioner.
Dave Turley, Mayor of Woodland Park.
Welcome back. Welcome back.
Good to be here. I will tell you that it is not a pretty thing to be flying through the air at 45 miles an hour off a motorcycle and landing on a rock.
You're not that aerodynamic?
I am not that aerodynamic. Although I will tell you, being in the hospital for 15 days and going through all that, I am more aerodynamic now by 18 pounds than I was when I went in.
Tyler Stevens, Green Mountain Falls.
Back to the PPACG table.
Rich Muzzy, Pike Peak Area Council of Governments Environmental Program Manager.
Beverly Mayeski, Finance Manager.
Jason Wilkinson, Policy and Communications.
Bill, are we over to you, or is there somebody behind the post? Oh.
Charles Cochran with Springs Engineering.
Good morning, I'm Bill Gamble with RAC.
Bob?
Oh, Jim Godfrey, Chair of the CAC.
Tom Casuara, Town of Monument.
Victoria Chavez, El Paso County. Wendy Pettit, CDOT Region 2.
Michael Snow, CDOT DTD.
Lisa Streisfeld, CDOT Region 2.
Dave Poling, Parsons Brinkerhoff. Spark Anthony, CDOT Region 2.
Actually have our number one guy. It's not came this way. I don't know speak what proposed ballot initiative.
No.
Yeah. Don Hunt.
Interesting.
We have been joined by Sharon.
Sharon Brown, City of Fountain. And before you go on, I'd just like to say, this is by far my last meeting. I was not elected mayor, and I'd like to thank the PPACG. I covered a number of more meetings than our regular representative, and I'd like to thank you for the privilege. I had worked off and on when it was first started because my former husband was city manager in Fountain, so we were involved in the very first start of PPACG, and I really pushed to keep Fountain involved. So, anyway,
Well,
like to thank you.
thank you. I do realize you were the alternate, and
Right.
you're right. You have been a very familiar face here
Thank you.
as the alternate, so thank you very much. Mark? We're doing introductions.
Hi, Dennis. I'm Mark Wallaby from, I just thought he's saying hi. Mark Wallaby, Park County Commissioner. Damn glad to be here.
Agenda approval. Changes to the agenda.
No changes?
No changes. Item number 3 is public comment. If you are here and wish to address this board on an item not on today's agenda, this would be your opportunity. Let's start with the audience first, and then we'll come back to this group, because often that comes from this group. But no one in the audience? You've got a reason to be here. I'm glad you're here. Anybody on the board? Clerk and Recorder Williams.
Just briefly, I want to, since we have a body with other elected officials from these communities, We legally, in this last election, needed to have 4 voter service and polling centers. But when we looked at it, our offices, which are those first 4, are all kind of in the middle of things. And so I want to thank Fountain and Monument both for offering their services as VSPCs for the voters, not just in their communities, but anyone who might have been closest to that one. So thank you, and we look forward to working with these communities again. And that made it so about virtually about 90% of the people with that were very close to a voter service and polling center. Few out east, southeast, particularly, were a little further away. We also had one at Callahan Fairgrounds for not quite Rama, but at least closer.
I mailed mine in, Wayne. I had faith.
Okay, so, but I want to thank them and just appreciate that and appreciate the partnerships we have with each of your communities, depending on the election and working with us, and particularly appreciate it when it's at no charge. So, thank you.
Happy to help. What are we, chopped liver? I thought we had a station for you, too.
I thanked you after
You did
the
already.
recall election. That's true. I should point out there were also mail ballot drop-off locations,
Yeah.
and I should
Oh,
accept
thank you.
correction. Thank Manitou for being a mail ballot drop-off location, and the city of Colorado Springs. And when our 24-hour, I forgot those. Thank you. When our 24-hour drop-off at Centennial Hall had some issues with falling concrete, Colorado Springs Police Department filled in as a 24-hour drop-off location. So thank you very much to the city of Colorado Springs. Now I better go through and make sure No, we did not have one in Teller. That's a different county or park, so we're safe there.
No drop-offs in park.
And but we did thank all of you for making that work. So thank you very much.
And we've been joined by Commissioner Clark. So thank you.
Are
We
we
did
doing roll
introductions.
call?
No,
Yeah.
we've done introductions. I'm trying to
Okay.
be polite here
I
as
just
a
wanted to
host.
say I'm very pleased to see Mayor Turley
You missed the jokes. So.
safe and sound.
And they're never the same twice, so. And before we go to our regular agenda, welcome Andy Pico. Item number 4, consent items. If they're, Norm Steen.
Chairman, I just have a real small correction, clarification on the minutes from last meeting, if it's okay. Item 6A.
Okay?
6A, action item, second paragraph, reads, highlights of the 2014 budget included unchanged member dues amounts. That's correct in its total, but individual member dues did change. So I would just maybe add a clarifying word, just read, 2014 budget included unchanged total member dues amounts, would clarify the point.
Do we have a motion for approval with that correction?
So moved.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 5, committee reports. Transportation Advisory Committee. Tom Casawara.
Good morning. At our last meeting, it was fairly benign, again. We had 2 TIP amendments that were recommended for approval. And on the 2040 Regional Transportation Plan goals and performance measures, we made some recommendations to reduce the list, and staff has taken care of that. However, after we voted to reduce the list to make it a little more workable, I think CAC came back and added some back in. So the recommendation from PPACG staff today is to go with CAC's. So that's just something for you to consider, that the 2 committees were a little bit at odds as far as measurements. We found it a little more difficult to have all of those measures in there, some of which we didn't feel were measurable. You don't want to have measurements that are not measurable. So that's our position, but you guys have the final say. We also had a report on the 2040 small area forecast. It was an update, and we recommended release for public comment for the 30-day period. And just to mention that there's a stakeholders meeting in Monument next Wednesday, I believe, for the Regional Non-Motorized Transportation System Plan. That's at Big Red, which is the D38 facility on 2nd Street. And that was about it.
Thank you.
Questions?
Questions? Thanks, Tom. We had a question over here, back to our consent items. In my mind, the motion was to approve the consent items with the change to A. Was that the intent?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, so the entire consent agenda item has been approved then. Back to committee reports. Community Advisory Committee, Jim Godfrey.
Good morning, Jim Godfrey, Chair of the CAC. I'd like to add to Tom's comment about the Walk Bike Connect thing. There's a meeting tomorrow at the Regional Development Center from 6 to 8 for stakeholder inputs and public input to that plan. So the CAC agenda, nothing much to add than what's in your minutes. We did approve for release for public comment, the small area forecast, the goals and measures of the regional transportation plan. The CAC did have some clarifying comments on a couple of the goals. We accepted the tax as they had done them with a few exceptions, and I think that you'll be presented with those today, primarily looking at again what is measurable, and we have some statisticians on the CAC, and they felt pretty hard about some of the changes that you'll see recommended in terms of measuring improvements in impervious areas. So that was a big one. But other than that, nothing other than what's in the minutes.
Questions for Jim? Thank you. Regional Advisory Committee, Bill Gamble.
Good morning.
Morning.
In October, after we had funded all of our providers, we did receive some extra money from the State Unit of Aging. We were going to use that $100,000 almost to throw a party for all of you, but Rod and Guy said we had to distribute it among our providers. So our technical the party's off. So our technical review committee will be deciding based on their requirements on how to redistribute the remainder of those funds that were given to us. At our last meeting, we had presentations by the Golden Circle provider and also Fountain Valley, which were both outstanding. And during the last month, we've had several health fairs. You may have gone to a couple, but there were two that were notable, one at Hillside and one at Tri-Lakes. So get your flu shots, go to the health fairs. The RAC committee is supporting those in various ways in terms of having a table and providing information about health for seniors. So that's it.
Questions for Bill? Thank you, sir. Thank you. Water Quality Management Committee.
I'll go ahead and do that update.
Okay.
Yeah.
Rich.
The Water Quality Management Committee reviewed two site applications. One you saw on the consent calendar. The other one, the Four-Way Ranch lift station, there were some concerns expressed at the Water Quality Management Committee meeting and the CAC meeting, and the applicant decided to go ahead and get those concerns addressed first before coming to the board. And then we gave a update of what's going on at AFCARE, Arkansas Fountain Coalition of Urban River Evaluation. Are there any questions?
Questions for Rich?
Thank you.
Thank you. Mobility Coordinating Committee. Gail?
Good morning. Gail Knowles with the Mobility Coordinating Committee. We had a nice short meeting last month. Most notably, we welcomed two new people to the committee from City Transit, and we also welcomed Angel Bond here with Council of Government as our mobility manager. So we're excited that these new people are part of our group, and their expertise and skills and knowledge about transportation will help us all move forward. We had some discussions about coordination, and most significantly, there are two bids out regarding capital and operating funds for specialized transit and transit that we are working together on. And we also had a community conversation led by the United Way about transit issues. Anything else? Any questions?
Questions for Ms. Knowles?
Thank you.
Thank you. Brings us to our action items. 6A. our draft budget and work program. Beverly Majewski.
Good morning. This is the second presentation of the proposed budget, and the work program was distributed in your board packet, and that's the new piece of information. Staff is available for any questions related to that, and since there were no changes recommended last month for the budget, I'll leave it open to you as to the depth of this presentation.
Now, we did see this last month. We don't have to approve it until December. We could have Beverly back down here saying, here's the same document again, or we could give her directions to bring back a different document. But we certainly have the ability to approve it today if we're ready to. Questions for Beverly? No. Yes.
How are we going to spend this windfall of additional grant money that we have?
517?
517.
I know, it's really,
Party's back on?
Oh, we need a subcommittee.
yes.
Given that it hasn't changed, I would move to approve.
Second.
Okay.
Any discussion? Anyone in the audience? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion approved.
Okay, so then I just happen to have the budget resolution prepared with today's date on it. I had it prepared last month, too, and it just didn't come through. So I will give this to the chairperson, Dennis, to sign.
Okay.
Okay, thank you so much.
Good job.
Item B is our air quality, and let me get that budget resolution in the queue. Yeah.
Good morning again. PPACG staff, the Air Quality Technical Committee, and the Community Advisory Committee recommend the board publish the Air Quality 2013 Trends Report. I did a presentation at the meeting last month, and the board recommended to go ahead and table this item until this month, so I'm back before you this month. I did make some corrections to pages 5 and 16 of the report regarding clarification of the oil and gas and the amount of emissions that we're seeing here in El Paso County versus where most of it's going on, which is in Larimer and Weld counties. So with that, rather than going into doing another presentation, I'll open it up to any questions or comments.
So your request would be for us to release this for the 30-day comment period?
Actually, there's really not much to comment on. It's intended to be a factual report, so the recommendation is just to release the report.
Okay. Any discussion? Commissioner Clark.
Not really of the report itself. And maybe this is a Rob question, but as it relates to our board, are we not supposed to have somebody serving on this board having to do with air quality? And where are we with that?
I have.
Rich has a later.
Can I have a phone call into Mike Silverstein, who is the Secretary of the Air Quality Control Commission, to find out who would be the best Air Quality Control Commission member to serve. Okay. And I guess on a note, I did talk to Mark Pfeiffer regarding the Water Quality Control Commission representation, and he did volunteer to go ahead and serve as the representative for the Water Quality Control Commission. Now, I know that wasn't your question, but
no,
since,
it's okay.
But since we were on
covers air and water,
anyways,
I don't know that there's much more.
I agree. Most people see it as transportation, but I'm glad you see it my way.
It is life-giving and life-taking. So I wanted to know where we were and to see if there was any need for our chair of PPACG to follow up to make sure that happens, so that I just want to make sure we're in compliance and with whatever regulations exist in terms of our board makeup.
Right. I'll go ahead.
If there was any pressure that that we needed to put as a board to make a
I
little
don't- I
phone
don't-
call here or there?
I don't think so. I'll go ahead and follow up with Mike.
And I know that really didn't have to do with the monitoring and trends report, but it was interrelated. I'm a woman, just stretches sometimes.
Trustee Stevens.
Carrying through with that, that thought and following that.
You're a woman?
And we know
Here to make this announcement.
he's my
On that note,
constituent.
Dave's leaving.
I don't recall whether it was in our bylaws or in state statute, but I believe the air quality appointment to this board is the governor appointed, is it not? Or am I making-
No. I mean, the Air Quality Control Commission members, along with the Transportation Commission and Water Quality Control Commission, are all appointed by the governor, but it was my understanding that the representative to our board is not appointed by the governor to our board. That's kind of up to us. That's my understanding.
Rob?
Yeah, and I think Sally, you're just ahead of the game. Bylaws have the changeover. The current bylaws have the Transportation Commissioner as well as the Air Quality Commissioner. They're all appointed by the governor. They pick from their group to assign someone to this board. So that's not a change in your bylaws, it's just a clarification. We used to have a rep that knew about this area, but as Rich is talking to the staff to try to find someone who may have heard of the Pikes Peak area, because there's no designated rep from this area. Water quality, yes, but air quality, not yet. So Rich, we think we'll be able to find someone.
Councilmember Knight.
Yeah, just refresh everybody's memory. We tabled this on my request, and I appreciate that. I did hear back from CSU. There were no concerns. But in trying to find, I was unable to find the old copy to compare those two changes you talked about. So can you tell us exactly what you changed on 5 and 16?
On page 5, and I think it was Councilman Miller's request, that there was language in there which made it unclear that the oil and gas development that was going on was in Larimer and Weld counties. And
Okay, so you just added that line to the...
yeah, and so I clarified that because oil and gas development is referenced on page 5 and 16 of the report. So I just clarified that the oil and gas development is going on in Larimer and Weld counties, and it's kind of the largest source of nitrogen oxide compounds, and I also added some references. So that was the only change that was made from the old copy and the new copy. So under oil and gas development on page 5, that's a section, and on page 16, under Denver and North Front Range Ozone Control Area Attainment Plan.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
Commissioner Steen.
Just a question, Rich. There was some discussion in the work program that a decision had been made concerning the lowering of the ozone standard. And my understanding from the ozone report in the air quality management report itself, that the decision is still pending, is just being proposed for 2014, wouldn't finalize until 2015. So
Right.
bit of a disconnect between the work
Yeah,
program and this.
I'll make sure to get that fixed. It's been kind of a rotating, I guess, target for the EPA. They keep on saying they're going to go ahead and change it, and then they keep delaying it. So yeah, if it's, I'll go ahead and what's in the memo is accurate.
So no decision has been made?
No decision has been made. And the last I checked, it won't be until 2014.
Okay.
But I couldn't get an exact month, and in a way, it wouldn't matter if I got an exact month because it would probably be delayed again.
Sure. Okay. At some point, you tell us what that means
Yeah.
to us.
Okay.
Okay, good.
Other questions or comments? Do we have a motion to release?
So moved.
Second.
Other comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Rich. Item C would be our Transportation Improvement Program Amendment number 10, Brian Vitale.
Good morning, thank you. Brian Vitale with PPACG's Transportation Program. We're asking for your approval of TIP Amendment number 10 to the 2013-2018 Transportation Improvement Program. It consists of two actions requested by CDOT. That's to add $220,000 of federal regional priority project funds for utility pole relocation, and $400,000 of hazard elimination and safety funds for additional final engineering costs. And this is in the span of Powers Boulevard. If you remember, several months ago, you approved TIP Amendment 5 to construct acceleration and deceleration lanes at 9 locations along Powers Boulevard. Amendment and request to add these additional dollars, for utility pole relocation between North Carefree and Barnes, and then to cover the increased final engineering costs. Both the TAC and the CAC recommended approval. The details can be seen in Attachment 1, the request letter from CDOT, and Attachment number 2 is their proposed changes in their table, and then our proposed changes are identified in Attachment 3. That shows the additional dollars being added. And I can answer any process questions, but Mark Andrew from CDOT Region 2 can answer any project-related questions.
Clerk Recorder Williams.
Mark, are these poles being relocated to a location compatible with the approved alignment of powers after the expansion?
That's a good question. Yes.
Good. It's a good answer.
We're going to clear up. We're debating whether we put them underground or overhead in terms of cost, but ultimately we want to put them in a location where we don't have to move them when we build powers to a freeway. Okay.
Mayor Snyder.
Sure. So it's 4 poles being moved for $220,000.
It's not 4 poles.
It's not 4
No, I think that's an error. It's essentially the whole run from North Carefree up to Barnes on that west side, and I don't know how many poles. I'm sure there's several dozen. It's about a mile.
You're basically adding, it's a decel and XL lane, but it's really adding another lane.
Correct. Okay. And so, yeah, the poles are going to be right in conflict with the ditch where we need to put drainage, and we all know drainage is a challenge on powers, so we want to improve that as best we can.
And the only people eligible to move a pole are the utility companies themselves?
Correct. Not necessarily. Now, we prefer to do an agreement with CSU and have them hire an independent contractor to do that work. So they're in control of that. But we will work and coordinate where that line needs to go.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions, comments?
Thank you.
Do we have a motion to approve?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. 6D, Brian, you get to stay up here. Regional Transportation Plan, Goals and Performance Measures.
Thank you. We're asking for you to approve the release for public comment for a 30-day public comment period, the goals and performance measures for our new 2040 Regional Transportation Plan. Over the last several months, actually since August, we've been meeting with our advisory committees to discuss where do we move forward from what is already in our adopted 2035 Regional Transportation Plan. And you'll see that for your review or for your needs, Attachment 1 is where we started the process. They're the goals and performance measures that were adopted by you in January of 2012 when our current 2035 Regional Transportation Plan was adopted by you. So that's a starting point. That's just for your reference. Attachment 2 is what we're recommending today for you to approve for public comment, for the 30-day public comment period. But over the last several months, we've heard a lot of comments from our advisory committees and from you the last several months in September and October. Where we started was from 17 goals and numerous performance measures. Right now, we are down to 13 goals, and that was a result of combining some similar or like goals. There was a connectivity, accessibility, mobility goal, or two goals actually that were combined into one. And then the greenhouse gases and air quality goals were combined into one goal. So we made some savings there. There were two other goals that were more of a policy statement policy statements that we felt really weren't needed as goals. So that's where we ended up with 13 goals. But we eliminated a lot of performance measures. You heard from both the TAC chair and the CAC chair about a little bit about the process that we went through. And last month, both committees met. The TAC, actually, the CAC recommended the tax changes. They were very consistent. They agreed on the goals. The goals really weren't touched. The discussion basically fell around the performance measures. And you heard from Mr. Casawara from Monument that the CAC wanted less performance measures for goals 10 and 12. If you look at page 3 on attachment 2, you'll see goal 10. And I'm not sure if it's colored in your packet or not.
It is.
Okay. So the first performance measure for goal 10, number of lane miles per capita, that is what the TAC recommended. They just recommended one performance measure. The CAC felt that they wanted to have the second and third performance measure added back in. So that's their recommendation. Goal 12, the first performance measure, percent of new transportation-related impervious surface area treated, was a performance measure that the CAC added that into their recommendation, whereas the TAC only recommended the second performance measure. So those were basically the changes, the goals they were consistent on, as I mentioned. It was just a difference of opinion on performance measures. And as staff, we met. We believe that we can collect the data for all of those extra performance measures, and we really don't see an issue with including them. But as you can see in your packet, along with the 30-day public comment period, we're going to have 4 focus groups held throughout the region, starting next week and going in the following week. So we'll have four total, and we're also having a open house here at PPACG for the goals and performance measures, and also a small area forecast that you'll hear from Emily in a couple minutes. So we'll be out for the 30-day public comment period, plus we'll be having an open house here for public comments, and we'll be collecting some more information from the public at those focus groups. So,
questions of Brian regarding the release for public comment? Commissioner Clark.
Just one comment. I have no objections to the additions that are in red, and I guess it's blue. What I would ask, though, is that where we use acronyms, if you please spell those out, because anyone who is not at this table, or even some of us who are at this table, sometimes don't know what you're talking about if you don't.
I'm sorry, I meant to
That's
mention
okay.
that. That's best management
There's
practices.
just a couple of acronyms in here that I think if they were spelled out, especially if somebody from the general public is reading this.
Sure. Okay.
Clerk from Recorder Williams.
Refer to Mayor Snyder.
Mayor Snyder.
So, Brian, we're going to release this in 10 and 12 with the 2 proposed performance measures, and then the idea would be to come back then next month and just carry those all the way through, or pick
Sure.
and choose, or what's the process?
Yes, well, depending on what your motion is today, but our recommendation is to release attachment 2 for public comment and see what information we collect from the public during the open houses, or the open house and the focus groups, and then come back to you. It may be January, I think. After
I would
the
expect
30-day.
that.
Yeah.
With a
For
preferred
final approval, right.
recommendation?
Yes, yeah.
Thank you.
Clerk and Recorder.
Is there as I look at item 10, what are the different categories of areas? Are there urbanized, urbanizing, and another, or are there simply two?
Well, for our MPO region, yes, that's what we're looking at, is the urbanizing areas and the urbanized area. So we're, since we are a 16-member COG, our MPO and the transportation dollars are just for that urbanized and urbanizing area. So that whittles down the number of communities from 16 to 9. So this is dealing with, yes, the urbanized area.
So by excluding the urbanizing areas, a project inside the urban area would get priority over a project outside the metro areas. So this would disadvantage projects in the counties as opposed to the municipalities to include this factor. Is that correct?
I see what you're saying. I don't think our intent is to not pit both urbanized and urbanizing areas against each other. That wasn't the intent. I mean, maybe we can clarify the language a little bit more. But projects that are evaluated, I mean, we're going to have to deal with evaluation criteria again in a couple months of how we score the projects.
But if we include as one of the factors the percent in the urbanized area, by definition, a project inside city limits is going to get a higher score than the same project serving the same number of people with the same benefit outside city limits. So I'm not sure if the factor should create a built-in advantage for one category of projects, and
right.
That's a concern.
No, and I don't think it was our intent. We didn't mean to do that. So, I mean, if we can clarify the language.
I don't know if clarifying the language does anything. It's the factor itself, by its definition. If it's urbanized gets extra points, then areas in the non-urbanized area will be disadvantaged. So I'm not sure the factor can be clarified. It's a question for this body as to whether you want to start with a built-in advantage for some projects over others based solely on location. The other comment I have is more general, which is I appreciate the fact there are fewer goals. I'd like to see it down to 10 because I can count that many on my fingers. But I appreciate the fact there are fewer than there were.
And we, council member made that suggestion last month, and we did look at trying to go down to 10. But we feel that we're at the level, the goals that we need to look at to be consistent with MAP 21 and CDOT's long-range plan. We feel that we would risk being consistent if we whittled some more goals down. But that's why the number's still at 13. But thank you.
So, Brian, how are you going to deal with clerk and recorder's question regarding giving extra points to a project?
Well, I mean, we could just clarify it by saying number of projects and
I realize we're releasing for public comment, but I kind of want them to comment as much as possible on what we think is somewhat.
I mean, we could change that to just say our total MPO area.
Rob?
Yeah, I think some of the goals and performance measures are inherently going to weigh against each other, like carbon monoxide emissions. If you're driving from a rural area into the urbanizing area, if we save that trip, put it on a bus, it's going to have less emissions. Does that mean that transit-type project is going to get more points in that category? Yes. And same thing with Wayne's comments. We'll look at it because eventually this board is going to have to figure out the weighting of the different goals and see, do we really want safety, or do we want capacity? Do we want more transit? So all those things are yet before you. In the memo, you can see all the action items you have in the next 10 months to look at that. So you will be building in that waiting to decide what's more important of all these. You may say air quality is the number one thing, so we're going to give a heavy weight to emission reduction. Or you may come down on 10 other things. So right now, all the goals and objectives, they have some of that. Some projects will score really well in some of these areas. Others will do terribly. But that's the nature of the 150 to 200 projects that'll go through the committees and come through this board and go out for public comment. But we'll look at it because it's a valid comment, because some of these things do build in a priority based on what the project may be, and if you weigh it against one or the other goal. But we'll look at that to try to balance that out, because we agree, and Brian said it, there's no intention to skew the goals to get a certain set of projects. We'll just run everything through it, but again, we'll be back with the weighting, and I think that really develops your list.
Okay. So, further comment?
I guess I'm still a little stumped then, because to me, that point is very clear that the language says they do intend to give priority to urbanized areas. And if that was not the intent, then maybe it's appropriate to either strike the performance measure or change it substantively to designated or projects in the MPO. I get your point, Chair, that there needs to be a change in order to meet the intent of the CAC and the board here. So,
Mayor Snyder.
Well, I think it's a worthy goal.
You do.
I want it in there. I mean, and I don't want to shortchange the rural communities and the others. I understand that, and I think we can address that in the weighting and others. But I think it's something that we should aspire to. And I think we need to promote infill and more density and less sprawl. And so, as far as a goal and it's something I would like to keep in there.
Other comments? Well, do we have a motion to from the audience?
Victoria Chavez, El Paso County. Clerk and Recorder Williams is absolutely right. We did have that discussion at TAC as well. The reason that we had eliminated the infill and the brownfield is because the per capita measurement is going to encompass that. And so having three of them that basically measure the same thing of whether there's a high per capita, a lot of people around that project or not, we figured it measured the same thing. And so it was a bit redundant to measure it a couple times, which is why we got rid of it. It still goes to the same goal of providing infill. It just doesn't do it 3 times. And we certainly have some rural areas in El Paso County that would be basically exempt from transportation dollars, even within the MPO region. And certainly by splitting it between urban and urbanizing, you're taking a large part of county projects just completely off the table. So we had some concerns from the county's perspective on that one as well.
So, Victoria, which goals specifically?
Oh, and I don't have them in front of me. Thank you. Goals from all over. Okay, wait. New glasses. So that was goal number 10 is where we have the lane miles per capita, and that's what the TAC recommended. And we recommended removing the brownfield and the infill sites because it's extremely difficult to even define a brownfield, better yet, measure it. Infill is very much the same way. How many buildings need to be around that project before it's an infill project or not? It's just a tough thing to measure. And again, we thought it was encompassed in the per capita one. And then the census-designated urbanized area, again, that's the one that just takes the county completely out of the process. So those were the two that I had the biggest concerns with, and that is why TAC recommended removing those two, leaving the per capita, because we think it measures your goal regardless, and we think it measures it in a better and more definable way. That's my comment. Any questions?
Questions for Victoria? Thanks.
Thank you.
Other comments? So before we have when we have a motion to release, I guess I would like the maker of the motion to include whether they wish to leave those in or take them out.
Mr. Chairman, I'll just start. I'll make a
Mr.
motion. I will make a motion to release this for public comment, to include the highlighted changes by the CAC and TAC on pages, I guess it's attachment 2, 1, 2, and 3.
Second.
Can I ask clarification? You said including both CAC and TAC.
Because they
have
disagreed.
opposite recommendations.
So does it include all of our highlighted changes on those 3 pages?
So remind me where the disagreement is.
On 10,
On 10.
the 2 red ones, the TAC said no, the CAC said yes.
Well, I think we leave the TAC. I think we leave the TAC ones in.
The CAC ones.
Well, TAC is the red, correct?
No.
No.
Oh, the CAC is the red, and the blue is the TAC. And patty whack.
On goal 10.
Maybe dog a bone.
So your thinking is we leave everything
I
in
think we
that's
should just
printed?
leave it all in for discussion purposes and for public comment, and then we can bring that back based on any comments that we get.
Good, 'cause
That's my motion, anyway.
And that's what I intended to second. So
Love it or not.
glad for that clarification.
Everybody comfortable, they know what they're voting on here? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Brian. And thank the CAC and the TAC for the time they spend on this. We appreciate that. Item E, draft 2040 small area forecast. Emily Lindsay.
Hi, everybody. I'm Emily Lindsay with the Transportation Program. I am back with the small area forecast.
And again, before you get too far down the road, this is not for approval, this is for a release.
Right, this is
Okay.
for a release for the 30-day comment period.
Okay.
So just to remind everybody, the small area forecast is a routine planning process that we begin with every regional transportation plan that projects where people might live and where people might work. And again, even though this is the 2040 small area forecast, we'll get a chance to revisit this in every 3 to 4 years, so you will have a chance to edit it kind of along the way. And since it is a forecast, just good thing to remember when looking at stuff like this, we're really looking for something that's reasonable. So we start with the existing scenario in 2010, which you can see in a lot of those maps and charts, and we look at what is expected to come countywide to the region. And we work with the small area forecast task force to determine where these people might live and where they might work within our region. And the small area forecast task force is made up of members from KONO, HBA, Pikes Peak Association of Realtors, the Business Alliance, school districts, local land use and transportation planners, and you can see the whole list of those that were invited in attachment 1. So this draft has gone through many iterations. We have been meeting with the task force for over 6 months now, working to come up with a reasonable draft forecast for you all. And the small area forecast task force, the CAC, the TAC, and PPACG staff all feel comfortable recommending this for the release for a 30-day public comment period, during which we'll hold an open house, like Brian said. So I will leave it there. If there's any questions, let me know.
Questions for Emily? Do we have a motion to release?
Second.
Further comment? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Emily. PPACG Board Bylaws Revisions. Rob, you want to take this one?
I think I will. First, on the table, we did print out a new version of the section, Article 3, Section B4, that we've been focused on special membership. Our Mayor from Manitou Springs, in his great reading, found a couple of suggested changes. Last paragraph under special membership for regional military installations, we changed installations there, but we did not change it in the two other spots in that paragraph. So we're recommending to change base to installations as part of that paragraph. You've been looking at the bylaw changes of this section for a couple of months now. What you have in your packet and now what's on the table with the change from bases to installations would be the recommendation for approval of your bylaws.
Comments? Questions? Do we have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
With those changes.
With that, we'll call the roll. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item G, establish nominating committee for PPACG officers for 2014. I will take this one, I guess. I'm on the wrong form here. I think we all received an email letting everyone know it's time for the officer selection and ask people to throw their name in the hat. You have a summary in front of you on page 1 of folks that have done that. And our purpose here today is to form a nominating committee. Commissioner Clark.
I am going to pull my name off because I see that someone else is interested in being secretary, and I've enjoyed my time as an officer here, but I have a lot of other things going on, and I think it's fine to turn the secretarial position over at this time. So I know that Norm Steen is interested from Teller County. Doesn't mean that others might not be interested, but I wanted to let you know that I don't know if we'll need a nominating committee unless we have more than the number of seats available, which certainly is a possibility, but I'm going to withdraw.
Thank you. I think we still need a nominating committee just based on the fact that almost everybody said they'd like to do any of the above, so we'd be looking for volunteers, 3 to 5, to serve on the nominating committee.
Daryl and Wayne and I will do it.
Wayne, I hope that's why your hand was going up. Those of us living in the South, should we be nervous? Or
Well, it means that it's unlikely there'll be anyone from the North who's an officer, so you might be concerned about that.
Anyone else wishing to volunteer? Looks like it's you three. Let you all figure out when and who and how, and we'll be looking for a report back at the next meeting.
Correct.
Okay.
If I could ask one additional question.
Yes.
You'd sent that out. You have responses from some people. There are many people who appear not to have responded at this point. So can we set a deadline that if you intend to respond, that you please do so in the next week?
Absolutely. That way you know you have a hard cutoff. So everyone has heard that. The nominating committee has said if you respond later than this time next week, they'll put you in the hat for the next year or something like that. Thanks, Wayne.
You sure?
I believe that's all the action we needed on that one. And our timing was impeccable as we come to item 7A, Impact 64 presentation. Executive Director Don Hunt joined us just moments ago. So, sir, you're up.
All right.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate you coming down.
Thank you. And I have along with me my partner in this presentation, the Mayor of Lone Tree, Jim Gunning. So I'm going to start off, if that's okay, and talk about where CDOT is, where we are as a state on transportation. And then Mayor Gunning talks a little bit about Impact 64, which is the organization that's talking about future transportation funding. So thanks so much for inviting us down today. Appreciate it. So this is an update of kind of what we're doing with the existing money at CDOT. Let me get the right. I bet I hit that one and it works pretty good. Yeah, it does. So I don't have to tell you that transportation is one of the basic foundations of what we do as a state in terms of supporting our economy, but I do talk more about that slide with more general kind of groups. Basic numbers when we look at 2040 in Colorado, population projected to increase by over 50%, vehicle miles traveled by 71%. You know, that one could be maybe a little bit debatable. Certainly there's been a decrease in personal vehicle miles traveled, so maybe that won't get quite to 71%, but we're still going to be a growing state here in Colorado. This is definitely going to be a growing region. And then the kind of delay that we're projecting by 2040, and I think there's some really good, one of the things I've tried to do since becoming director is really get into some of the literature on the relationship between congestion and economic growth. And there's some really pretty good stuff out there that says at a certain congestion delay, you start to see a decrease in employment growth all over the country, every area that's studied. You know how we get our money. It's from the gas tax, which hasn't changed in over 20 years, as well as license fees. And, of course, part of the license fees are now from the FASTER bill that was passed in 2009, a bit controversial, but I'll tell you what, it's $200 million a year for bridges and safety to CDOT. It's a real savior right now for this state, and it also, some of that safety money makes its way to cities and counties. And then something we're always dealing with, the off the top, which is now 11% of the Highway Trust Fund for State Patrol, motor vehicles and ports of entry. So, again, we haven't changed the gas tax in 20 years. We just got passed up by the state of Wyoming on July 1st. I never thought I'd stand up and have a slide that had the state of Wyoming gasoline tax higher than Colorado, but they have a Republican House, Senate, and governor and said we need to raise the gas tax by 10 cents in Wyoming to support future transportation. A little tougher here. We have a little law called Tabor. So it's hard to work out the details of a gas tax, and Mayor Gunning will be talking about that a little bit more. I think one of the other interesting things that happened this summer, and it's not on this chart, but Virginia, the state of Virginia, really shifted away from the gasoline tax towards the sales tax, and that you'll hear a little bit more about that. So CDOT revenues, you all know, I think. I've been here before. We kind of hit our peak in 2007. The reason for that is in that year we were receiving $468 million from the state general fund to supplement the gasoline tax. So that all went away in about a year after the Great Recession hit and the general fund constricted, and that has brought us down to the $1.2 billion today. But I do want to say, you know, what more money or no more money, it's my responsibility and CDOT's responsibility to do a great job with what we have. And I think we've initiated some new programs that really are trying to get our budget much more structured, really focusing mostly on capital maintenance, but I'll go around the circle. We spend almost a quarter of our budget every year on annual maintenance. That's snow and ice removal, cleaning up litter, filling the cracks in the pavement, and generally taking care of the annual upkeep of the 9,000-mile state highway system. By far and away, our biggest portion of the budget is capital maintenance. Now with the RAMP program, that's hitting almost $500 million, and I'll talk a little bit more about our asset management approach for capital maintenance. Pass-through grants, big chunk of money. I mean, we've pretty much taken the position that the money that comes from the federal government directly to the three MPOs. It's your money to decide what to do, what projects are most important to you. There's also, smaller amounts of money, like the Transportation Alternative program that gets spread across the state. But again, it's very much locally determined, the old enhancement program, how to spend that money. And then special programs, there's some special safety programs from the federal government, and also there is the faster safety money, which is the biggest block of kind of discretionary money that CDOT has at $87 million per year, and that's something we're working on, and how to get more effective spending of that new money that started to come in 2009 to have a bigger impact on safety. So while we're talking about what the future is for funding, we've been trying to do all of these areas, trying to get more out of the money that we do have. I'm going to talk a little bit about more out of the system and more dollars to construction primarily. This idea of capital maintenance, asset management, is something that we're putting all of our resources, all of our assets into, whether it's the highways, the bridges, areas where we're trying to protect rock slopes, walls, culverts, even CDOT buildings. We're saying we have about $500 million a year to try to get the most out of that entire system. And it needs to be done on a fiscally constrained basis. We've gotten a little bit into a position with our surface treatment that we were hoping that someday there'd be a ton more money and we could start reconstructing a third of the state highway system. The bill got up to $8 billion. We're never going to have that kind of money. So like other states, we're moving much more to an asset management program that recognizes we're not going to be able to rebuild big chunks of the highway system, maybe the interstates, but going back down to the base course on other highways, not likely. So getting fiscal constraint into our capital maintenance program was important. It has to be risk-based because we were probably not putting enough money into rockfall mitigation. For another $5 million, we're seeing we can lower the risk that's involved in driving on some of the mountain highways by being more proactive with rockfall mitigation. Lowest life cycle cost, you all know what that is. All governments are doing that in terms of your capital assets. And then what's really complicated and is tough for the Commission to do is how do you trade off that funding across all of the assets? If you take $10 million away from surface treatment and put it into bridges, what happens to safety, what happens to mobility in this state? And we're just getting a system that allows us to do that. So here's the capital maintenance program. This is where we are, again, enhanced by $150 million a year of RAMP, and I'll talk about RAMP a little more in a minute. But you can see by far and away our largest capital investment is on surface treatment. We think we can sustain about $240 million per year over the next 10 years, partly because of RAMP, partly because of debt retirement, and that's about $80 or $90 million more per year than we've been spending in the past decade. It should start to make a real difference in the surface condition of our roadways, and also the capital maintenance approach we're taking should extend our treatments to many, many more roads than our current system does. Then you can see Bridge is the other big program, largely funded by Faster Bridge program. That additional registration fees that were levied by the legislature in 2009, and then it drops off considerably into some of the smaller programs. So RAMP, Responsible Acceleration. I think all of you know a lot about that program because you were involved in applications for projects and were successful. Through advanced budgeting and better management of our cash in any given year, we're going to free up about $300 million per year for 5 years. It's a one-time deal. You know, when you move kind of from accrual accounting to cash accounting, it only works one time. You can't ever repeat it again. But it's going to be great for the next 5 years. And it's going to result in about $650 million of partnership programs and operation projects, and about $800 million into that asset management program. Again, the example, and a specific example, is that on the one asset of surface treatment, it raises our expenditure by $80 or $90 million a year just in surface treatment alone. So the objective of RAMP plus the asset management is, I think, we're going to be able to stabilize our system over the next decade. That's a big promise, but I think we can do it with RAMP, and then the fact that we're going to also retire our bond indebtedness, and the trans bonds will go away in 2018. We'll get another $167 million back into the program, and I don't know what the commission will do with it in 2018. If I had to make that decision today, I would say, follow up with RAMP, keep it in asset management, keep investing in preserving the system. So operation and partnership projects all over the state. The partnership projects were a little controversial because you can see, the Eastern Plains, for instance, tough to come up with that 20% local match. On the other hand, I'll give a lot of credit to a couple of places, Pikes Peak area as well as Pueblo said we'll actually devolve some of the state highways to come up with our local match to invest in I-25. I guess I'm a little embarrassed that we have to make Pueblo devolve and take care of state highways in order to fix I-25, but that's a little of where we are. It's a way to leverage the idea of local participation. And then also out in Grand County, Highway 9 that goes from Kremling to Rabbit Ears Pass, a rancher came up with $4 million, said, I want to invest in the safety of Highway 9. Now, it was a hedge fund.
That's a lot of cattle.
Wow. It was a hedge fund Wall Street rancher. So let me make that clear. But it didn't end there because Grand County came up with the other $4 million. That included a $100,000 personal contribution by one of the county commissioners from Grand County. So they raised $8 million, and we matched it with $32 million. And we're going to build a $40 million project with new shoulders, better safety, and also wildlife underpasses and overpasses. It is one of the most wildlife critical crash areas in the entire state. So, I feel guilty about that 20% local match, but it really got the creative juices flowing across the state, and obviously it extends what we're able to do at CDOT over the next few years with the RAMP funding. And then just, that other map isn't in there. Nope, they took it out. Okay. So this is where I want to turn it over then to Mayor Gunning. This is where TBD Colorado ended up with the CDOT annual funding gap. That's down quite a bit from where the Ritter Blue Ribbon Commission, which was $1.5 billion a year. The reasons for that is that, number one, we did get that faster funding to the tune of $200 million a year. Second is that we've become more realistic, again, with that surface treatment that I was talking about. We're not going to rebuild all those rural highways. And number three, we're able to count more on, in the Denver metro area, tolling when we add new lanes. And that adds some money to the system. So this is where we ended up, $157 million short on maintaining the system, $100 million a year for rural road safety. And I'm trying to make this pitch. Most of us live in the urban area, but rural road safety is a real concern in this state. Most of our rural highways, many of them do not have shoulders. You get in an accident situation where someone's weaving a little over that center line, there is no place to go, and fatalities occur. A harsh number is that 14% of all Coloradans are rural residents living outside of city limits. 14%. They account for 51% of all fatalities in Colorado. 14% account for 51%. So that $100 million is pretty important. Congestion relief in the Pikes Peak area, Colorado Springs area, Denver, Fort Collins is the big number. I think you could put most any number to that. $500 million is what TBD Colorado talked about. And then finally, we would like to start inter-regional transit in Colorado as a forerunner of inter-regional rail. We can't afford rail yet, but if we could get a good bus system that connects the already good regional transit systems from Colorado Springs, Denver, Fort Collins, and out to at least Glenwood Springs, maybe Grand Junction, start with skeleton service and see where we can build, where people are willing to pay some of the fare box, at least. We know we'll never recapture total costs. It is a subsidy deal on transit, but it starts to build another way, another option for people to interconnect our economy in Colorado. So, with that, I'd like to turn it over to Mayor Gunning, who will talk about the state initiative. I will introduce him as he's been just sacrificed so much of his time as the chair of the Metro Mayor's Caucus to talk about this across the state, and was just characterized by Vince Carroll of the Denver Post as a masochist yesterday. So, with that, I give you Mayor Gunning. There he is.
I assume that's for being a masochist, not for transportation. All right, well, thank you very much for letting us come down today. I certainly appreciate you giving us the time to talk about this. And as Don said, I'm the chair of the Metro Mayor's Caucus, which is kind of how I got roped into this, but I also strongly believe in transportation. I believe it is a comprehensive system. So I'm from Lone Tree. For those of you who've been up there, we have Schwab, Cabela's, lots of revenue, quite frankly, for a small city. We have no road problems in Lone Tree. Unfortunately, I can't stay in Lone Tree the entire time. Sometimes I have to drive to work or visit friends. And so really the transportation system is important to me and those who live in Lone Tree as well. So with that in mind, the Metro Mayor's Caucus reached out about a year and a half ago and talked to Progressive 15, Club 20, and Action 22, and we came together about 18 months ago and created what was called Impact 64 in an effort to talk about transportation funding moving forward. And to be honest, you can see the local needs are adding up there, but to be honest, we didn't start down the path of sales taxes, what I'm going to show you a little bit later. We started down the path, just like you would in this room as policymakers, of a gas tax. And we started down that path because it's a user fee and because from a policy standpoint, that's the right answer. So, and here's a list that's showing the kind of backs up what Don just talked about, the need in the local area from CML and CCI in terms of transportation needs. Here's the organizations that have been participating in the dialogue to date. And then before I go on to public opinion, let me kind of come back to what I was talking about. So we brought that group together and we started to build some momentum with more people coming into the conversation. We did some polling almost a year ago now, or a little over a year ago, in October and November of 2012. We did some polling to kind of see where we were at in terms of the voter and again, the idea of a gas tax, folks. I mean, that's really what it was about. So when you talk to the voters, this is what came out from a year ago. About half the people think the transportation system is okay, and the other half think that it's, if you look at it like that, the other half think that it needs some work. Well, those are the half using it probably. The voters who support for voter support for a budget increase was actually pretty good. When you talk to them about transportation, you ask them this question in the scheme of all these different issues, transportation always doesn't rise to the top. But when you talk to them about transportation separately, they understand that it needs work, right? And that is the issue that we're wanting to talk to them about. So you can see that, as you talk to them, 52% thought it was important. As you explained it to them in a focus group, that rose to 64%. Okay, when you talk to them about new revenues, you can see what happens when you talk to them about a gas tax. They didn't like a gas tax. They just said they thought transportation was important, but a gas tax is just not something they're interested in. And I want to tell you, that's not just locally. That is nationally. And I'll put some slides up here in a minute. But nationally, voters across the nation reject the idea of raising gas taxes. I can't explain that. Some people are going to probably take a look at that into the future. But our problem is the transportation system as it exists today. So there it is. There's 77% of the voters opposed raising the gas tax in a national poll. There's a Gallup poll. Again, across the nation, people have rejected the idea of a gas tax going forward. There are lots of issues out there. To be honest, I think part of it might be education, where the voter is today in terms of understanding how we fund these things, to be honest. But we're way behind with the voter. So when you talk to them about new revenues, you can see that they were really opposed to vehicle miles traveled. And you can see there that when you pull them aside and talk to them, that they went from being 72% opposed to 76%. So they
The trick is not to inform them.
I believe that may be the case. But you can see as we move over to the right and you see sales tax, you'll see that they were willing to accept the sales tax up to a half cent when we talked to them last time about improving the transportation system. And so I often make remarks when we get to this slide about where the voter is in terms of an education standpoint and where we are as not only a local region and a state and a nation in terms of infrastructure. So I don't know how we're going to fund transportation into the future. We all know what the needs are right now. Don did a very good job of explaining that. And we really have to find a way to fund transportation in the future. That, VMT is the most often mechanism talked about, and you can see where the voter is with that. We are a long ways from the voter understanding how we are going to fund transportation, not only today, but into the future as we do this. So what I'm going to put up here in a little bit is what we're calling a transition from how we fund transportation now to how we're going to fund transportation in the future. I don't have that answer, but I will look at all of you, most of you are elected officials, and tell you that, I hope that you start working on that, because we do need to find out how we're going to fund transportation in the future. So if it was, can't really see the top of that slide, but essentially they were willing to pay about a 0.7 cent sales tax, $60 per year. 68% were willing to do that. Again, they just look at sales tax differently than they do other taxes. You talk to any local mayors, they'll tell you the same thing. When you talk to them about transit, I think that there it is, over 60%, this was a statewide poll, over 60% feel that transit's important. So I think you can see the value system for transportation shifting somewhat in the state. People are starting to find transit as a more valuable proposition to them in terms of getting around.
Could you move that screen in just a little bit? Some of that push forward.
Now if you just can raise it up.
What's Fast Tracks?
Fast Tracks is the light rail system in Denver. RTD, a portion of RTD.
Jacqueline to the rescue here. A little carried away.
Recycle some of that.
So we'll blame the off-kilter on the commissioner.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So again, voters in the statewide poll did feel that transit was a value proposition. They wanted to start talking about it a little bit more. There's where we kind of started with in terms of gas tax. And, one of the problems the voters didn't like the gas tax, but even if you look at 10 cents up there, we were trying to net out of the total collected at least $250 million for CDOT, as we take a look at distributing the money around the state. And so you really needed to get even above 10 cents. And then there are other realities, and most of you are elected, you'll understand these realities. Somebody has to pay for the campaign, and if they're going to pay for the campaign, they want to make sure there's enough in it, enough of a return to make it worthwhile. And so you have to get to at least 10 cents to make it worthwhile, and there's clearly no appetite from the voters to do a gas tax that's 10 cents. So the people that kind of look in from the outside and say, hey, this is a good public policy initiative, they're not willing to sort of extend their resources for a 10-cent gas tax that has no momentum with the voter and is a dying tax. The tax is going to continue to die. So again, we need to start thinking about how we're going to fund transportation into the future. So there's where Impact 64 kind of ended up at, and then the polling kind of shut that down. But you can see the polling kind of led us to the 0.7 cents, which that's about $605 million a year over 10 years. And gives CDOT $242 million and breaks it up. Then the cities will get about $161 million and $202 million to transit. So we started looking at we looked at our priorities. Some of these slides, I hate to say, are kind of out of order compared to what we usually go through. I apologize for that. So we were looking at funding priorities throughout the state, and certainly public-private partnerships and polling for new capacity, or tolling for new capacity and managed lanes is a priority in the metro area. Don spoke to that already. That doesn't apply in some of the other parts of the state, shoulders, and where there isn't enough capacity to generate tolling revenues. But for the areas that have enough traffic, tolling has to be a part of the solution going forward to make the dollar stretch. All right, and so we kind of went over that. CDOT must have sent this slide presentation down.
Yes, so.
Should have used the one that was in my pocket. So here's where we kind of ended up at, which is at the straw man, and that is a 0.7 cent sales tax for 10 to 15 years. And to be honest, we really kind of settled, after talking about this for about 9 months with people around the state, settled on a 15-year sunset. So that would be divided up 2/3 to roads and 1/3 to transit. And the 2/3 that goes to roads would be divided up 60-40, 60% to CDOT and 40% back to the cities and the counties. And that, except for the metro area, which is working on its own solution, that 40% would be divided up to the HUTF formula, which is 22% to the counties and 18% to the municipalities. So if you look at this, it's sort of a layered approach. The CDOT portion is, and I know you've been working on that down here too, the CDOT portion would be specified projects that would be in the Blue Book when the voters took a look at that. So throughout the state, in the metro area, we've come up with a project list. I know that CDOT has worked with other areas of the state on a project list. And so we would have to we still have to prioritize those in the metro area. But the voters would see specifically how the money was going to be spent. It was obviously tailored very similar to what you've done down here with the RTA. That was really a lot of discussion in the beginning, was to sort of follow the model that you guys have put together down here. So from the road standpoint, that 60% would be very visible to the voter and how that money would be spent. The other 40% would be at the local level, and each local mayor or county commissioner could explain to their constituencies how they were going to use those monies. And you can see from the CML slide earlier that I put up in CCI that all the counties and cities have needs. I'm unique in that regard, but most of my partners in the metro area have very severe transportation needs at the local level also. The transit piece, 60% of that would go to RTD, and the other 40% would be distributed around the state to the other transit agencies. The areas that don't have transit agencies, then that money would go into the CDOT Transit Fund. All right, the statewide, I lost the name for a moment, but the statewide transit organization has been working on their own straw man to show how they would use those transit funds throughout the state. So, CASTA, thank you.
Mayor Snyder? I'm sorry, what was that split on the RTD of the transit
from the transit funds, the third that goes to transit, 60% would go to RTD, and the other 40% would go throughout the state.
Thank you.
So that's essentially the straw man that we have come to some consensus on at MPAC 64. And the group at MPAC 64 now, I know that Executive Director Donald's been attending, and so has Commissioner Steen the last couple of meetings. And that is a group of probably 50 people in the room at this point. And I've been working on this about a year and a half, and holding the statewide consensus together is difficult, but we do have sort of a statewide consensus. It's not without questions here or there, but we do have sort of a statewide consensus in the room at the moment about the straw man and going out for polling. And so really the next step, if you take a look, there's what that's going to net, $605 million a year, but that's a 10-year average, and so you can kind of see the big numbers. So really the next step is to go back and do an additional round of polling. That was always the plan from the beginning. We took the initial polling, we started to tailor what the voter told us around that polling, and then the idea was to come together with a statewide consensus with this group and see as much as possible and go back to the voter and talk to them about the straw man. I can tell you that I was called a couple days ago, and the polling has been fully funded by the business community, and they hope to be back out in the field the first week of December. I can't promise that, but they hope to be back out in the field the first week of December. As such, we think we'll have what they refer to as top-line results by the third week of December, and we're trying to put an impact meeting together for December 17th to sort of take a look at the top-line results of the polling. I think it goes without saying, if the polling comes back and it's very negative, then that's probably the end of the effort. None of the policymakers that I know that are involved are going to proceed without the voters sort of saying that they think this is a value proposition to them. But if the polling does come back in a positive fashion like it did previously, then I think we'll start to proceed down the path of how to get this on the ballot in 2014. And that discussion has mostly centered around the idea that it would be that it would not be referred to the ballot, that it would be petitioned onto the ballot. It would be an initiative. I'll tell you that Vince Carroll asked me yesterday in excruciating detail, or a couple days ago, about that very issue, and why we didn't want to send it back to the state legislature, and I. You know what? He knew the answer too, but he said, "I got to get you to say something." So I said that we spent almost 18 months working on this at the local grassroots policy level, with the mayors and county commissioners and people who are involved in it day to day, and that we've polled the voter once, and we're going to poll the voter again. And that after 18 months and the local policy labor's consensus from local policy level, and hopefully positive polling, that we probably have done all the filtering we need to do on this issue, and that it probably just needs to go to the ballot. So he didn't characterize it that way. His remarks were a little bit more he didn't think it should go to the legislature either. Let me just say that, but for the reasons I'm sure that you all have in your minds. But that is the next step for the effort, and obviously there's been lots of questions. The primary reason he called was about 66 failing so miserably in the latest election. I don't, and you can read the editorial if you haven't. I don't see that transportation and education are the same issue at all. I wish we weren't polling right after 66, but I'll tell you, the folks that are paying for the poll are comfortable. They're not the same issue. It's a different revenue source. And quite frankly, when you look at transportation, it's something that goes across all demographics. Education is sometimes isolated in certain areas. And people use the transportation system every day. I'm not here to say that education is not important. I'm just saying that transportation is something that is that every voter touches almost every day, and they understand in an intimate way. And so I really believe that they'll give that issue a fair look, and they'll give us a fair statement on what they currently think we ought to do. So with that, I guess we'd be glad to take questions,
Jim,
if that's possible.
Can I hand these out? One of the differences, education is really tough, transportation is difficult too, but we said one of the basics, and we really learned the lesson from the Pikes Peak RTA, is tell people what they're going to get. And don't overpromise. Have an A list and a B list. So that's a real principle in going forward. If this does make it to the ballot, this is where you are at the Pikes Peak Area Council of Governments. We were able to do this list and work across the state because we're right in the middle of doing a 2040 plan. So these were your most important projects as we went through the process, working with CDOT staff, with Tom. I am proud to say that I hardly ever hand out a list that has lines through projects, and it's a happy reason, and that's the Cimarron, Fillmore, and Powers Old Ranch were all funded as a part of RAMP plus. Yeah, check mark would be better, wouldn't it? So I'll get them to re-graphic this the next time we hand it out.
Don't leave, Don.
So let's. I saw Clerk and Recorder Williams' hand up early.
So a couple different things to cover. First, we are delighted to see these successful projects, and I'm delighted to see the recognizing you've got the whole Cimarron interchange crossed off, meaning that rest of the 20 million that we need has been found. So thank you.
I wouldn't say I have it perfectly found, but I'll say again, you have our commitment, Tom Rona and me and the commission. We are going to get there. Just don't ask me today exactly where every nickel comes from.
I don't need that part. I appreciate very much, though, the fact that this project that was on the REF-D list, that has been on the Transbonds list, is finally getting done. So thank you. I would note first, I appreciate, Mayor, your willingness to step forward, to suffer the slings and arrows. And
told me how many arrows there would be.
And I will tell you that this region has demonstrated in 3 separate votes a willingness to support transportation projects through the sales tax. The 2004 Pikes Peak RTA was approved by 55%. The Baptist Road RTA, that was the Baptist Road intersection with I-25 you drove through on the way here, was approved with 60%, and the Pikes Peak RTA renewal was approved 2 years ago, or a year and a half, actually a year ago. Time flies. A year ago with almost 80%, 79.5%. So clearly a record of doing the projects that are promised results in voters saying yes. And so one of the things in the messaging that has to be there is how are we assured that the projects get done? Because certainly with REF-A, there were some projects in the list that are still not complete. And REF-A didn't provide funding for all of the projects, and then the legislature took away the funding that was there. So one of the questions that I think will be asked is how are we assured that a legislature doesn't decide to siphon more of the gas tax off for other things? They've shown a willingness to do that with entry stations, with state patrol, with other things that are not transportation projects. So how do we lock the legislature off, not just from these dollars, but from siphoning the gas tax dollars like they've done to cover deficiencies in the state budget? And the other comment I have is more for the Transportation Commission, but ultimately that money that was going to pay for expansion projects in the Transbonds ought to stay in addressing those needs. So that's my input as our representative here, that just like those paid for those projects, they should continue to pay for those projects. But let me ask you about how do we protect the money?
Well, I didn't present that, but we are looking at a lockbox for these dollars. You know, what the state already controls, that's a different issue. So I can't speak to that. It's an issue that everybody sitting around the table is concerned with, and we're going to, if we proceed down this path, we're going to be doing more investigation with the lawyers to discuss that.
Because I think it's important to do that, because if you look at REF-C, that promised 5 categories: roads, bridges, and other transportation projects, health care, and education. And I may have misstated the order, but it had 5 things in it. And the legislature instead spent almost all of it on 2 of the things and left $10 million a year, I think, about for transportation. And so it's got to address both the sales tax and the gas tax siphoning that goes.
When you get down to the level of the mayors and the county commissioners, like most of you are in here, keeping your promises to those voters, because you see them every day, is very, very important. And so I can't tell you how important that is to the people that are sitting around the table, because it is mayors and county commissioners. And so the lockbox idea is on the table. And, in the end, if we can't get some kind of lockbox idea, there will be a lot of people that are nervous about that issue. And then when you talk about A, B, and C, there are plenty of examples in the state, especially in the metro area, about what happens when you tell them you're going to do something and you don't actually do it. So A, B, and C, and CDOT is already discussing that issue. The A list will be, we'll make some projections, but the A list will be it won't be as long as maybe the actual projection to make sure we get what's done. on the
85%
A-list.
maybe of projected revenue.
So to make sure we actually get the A-list done, and then we'll get into the B-list. Because the lessons have been learned, and you guys have done a very good job of showing everybody exactly what you need to do.
Thanks.
Commissioner Dwalby?
On the rural part of this, when you've got the transit package, and you've got the bulk of it going to the rural, or to the urban areas for the transit, and then you have that chunk of transit money that goes to the other counties, and you showed that slide with where the 20% went, it was all along those corridors, and it was there was big patches out here that didn't have any projects at all. So a lot of counties, like Park, I don't know how many other ones are like that, but they're really dispersed, and transit is an issue. There's not a whole bunch of people in one place trying to go to another place, so that it doesn't make sense for transit so much. If we could use that money for our 20% match, instead of using it for transit, I think this thing would go over bigger in the rural areas. It would give us an option.
Absolutely. Well, I'll answer. I'll give him a break. It's so great because, the reason Jim and I are great partners is he takes all the heat, right? This has to emerge as a local and regional initiative. If it looks like a state initiative, we aren't going to win. It has to come. I mean, if we don't get support across the state from city council members and mayors and county commissioners and folks like you, this is going to go nowhere. It's the only chance. But transit in rural areas, it ranks very highly in the polling that was done last November, and that's why I think CASTA, the Association of Transit Agencies in Colorado, is saying you need to have operating funds coming out of this ballot measure for rural counties for response transit, elderly transit. It's not the classic kind of bus or rail transit that might be in Colorado Springs or Denver, and that has to be part of this.
Other comments, questions? Councilmember Miller?
Yeah, I just have a couple comments. The different responses to the different types of taxes. I know you didn't mean to disparage the voters, but it was implied that they just didn't understand, they're not educated on the need for a gas tax. And I think what it amounts to are those numbers, is it's an inelastic thing, buying gasoline. You have to use it to go to work, to take your kids to school, and so you have no choice in those. And so I think the voters know what they're, it's not a matter of indoctrinating them and telling them what they think they need to know. So as the message goes out, I think it's real important to make sure that, it's not the implication that you just don't understand, we're going to work to educate you, because that message doesn't get received too well. And secondly, regarding the lockbox, the lockbox we have here is it's a separate organization because people don't have any trust that there's going to be any lockbox. You say, well, we're going to dedicate funds for this specific, because we even see it happening in the city where you say, well, there's a specific sales tax. You say, well, we're going to try to keep that together, and we're going to try to make sure that we're not reducing the dedication from the general fund. We're going to keep that percentage up to where it is. But when it comes down to it, the trust comes from the money going directly to a separate entity, and that's why I think there's the support in this region for PPRTA, because there isn't any trust for the government to do it. And to the extent that it could be morphed into a separate funding entity that the state legislature can't get their hands on, because a lockbox can be unlocked by the same people that put the lock on. We've seen that happen at all different levels. But when it goes to a different organization, they can't go and demand it. And I think that's led to a large portion of the success here is distrust for the funds actually be going to what they're doing and having a separate entity that's funding the projects. Colorado Springs has to come and apply to PPRTA to get a refund for those projects that they did. They don't just get the money automatically into the coffers and then they just make a simple transfer, because voters don't trust that. At least in this region, they don't. So,
I think I saw Councilmember Knight's hand up.
On this issue, can speak for Mayor Bach as well as this councilman, is that we don't like this, we don't support this. We're working with CML not to endorse it if we're not come straight out. I mean, you look at, and there's a couple of reasons. You look at the MOA we had with CDOT, where we're supposed to get, this region's supposed to get 75 cents back on the dollar. We didn't get that as a rolling average, and we didn't get the MOA renewed. But more importantly, we have RTA here, it's a 1% tax.
Is your mic on?
So we have RTA here that is a 1% tax. It does have a sundown clause. We were able to renew it once. It's proving very valuable. If we want to renew it again, how do you think the voters are going to feel if there's already an additional 0.7% tax that's going statewide? And, the money historically in the past has shown to not to come to regions like ours. So mayor's against it, I'm against it.
Councilmember Pico?
I'm going to comment on, or add on to comments from both of my colleagues. I think one reason the sales tax gets a whole lot more traction than the gas tax is exactly as he said. You don't have a whole lot of control over the gas, but you do a whole lot on sales because you can factor in what you want to go buy, and it's very much similar to the different tax proposals that have been floating out, like the fair tax or the flat tax, have elements of that. They kind of shift a lot more of the tax load into a sales tax type of thing. Another comment I'll make on top of Councilman Knight's comment is that, we already do have a regional setup just like this. You're doing, I think, a good job of matching a formula that works, but to add two of them into this area is going to be a tough sell, I think, because really you're talking about 1.5 cents, for transportation. That's kind of pushing the envelope a little bit here. It might be a little bit more of a better stretch to go back out there and says, why don't you guys regionally copy these guys and do that as opposed to going statewide? Those organizations want to do that. But that's kind of my thoughts on that. I'd have a tough time saying, have fun putting on a ballot, but I'm not exactly going to be, I will not be out there saying that this is a good idea to do, simply because of those things.
Director?
So, really good points, The issue about why do statewide is that isn't where we started. I started about 3 months in the job, and I started working with the Denver Regional Transportation District that was talking about a 4/10 sales tax to finish the rail system fast tracks in Denver. That got to a point, and I said, why don't we make it a little larger sales tax and do highways and transit, make it balanced? That created an interesting conversation in Denver. Finally, the RTD just wasn't ready to go with another vote. And then I got called out to the rest of Colorado, and they said, don't you ever try to solve Denver's problem in transportation on your own. You are the director of the State Department of Transportation. Don't come back here until you've got a statewide solution. Fair enough point. I think we, and to some extent, Pikes Peak RTA has a transportation solution here in Colorado Springs. Denver can probably come up with its own solution, but we have a system here we're trying to build for the economic health of all of the state, and that's why we're trying to have the statewide conversation. And it's really simple. We will build these projects, and maybe some more, if we have more money. These are state highways. Pikes Peak RTA does not fund state highways other than a little bit. If we don't have the tax, we won't build these. We're a maintenance organization on the current funding. And despite the conversation about the MOU, I'm telling you, you can't make those MOUs work if you go from $1.7 billion to $1.2 billion. We had to go to a maintenance organization and lost our ability to invest in capacity. We're trying to get it back. Whether we can or not, I don't know. We'll see.
Can I make a couple of comments?
Sure, go ahead.
For both the council members, I understand. I think Don framed it up pretty well. Just as a little background, we were on a parallel track in the metro area with the Metro Mayor's Caucus and the MAC about doing a metro area RTA. Copy what you did down here, because we need those transportation funds. And we were, at the same time, we were talking with our statewide partners. We made the decision to set that aside in what we thought was the best interest of the state, because we know that we're not going to get every penny back, especially in the metro area. We do not get every penny back that we give to the state transportation system. We made that decision as a body to set that aside and work on the statewide transportation system because it's comprehensive and it's necessary. The metro area, what you guys have done down here is fantastic. The metro area could do something that would be great, but eventually you won't be able to get 70% of the trucks into Denver, and most of the things that travel are by truck. If you ever take a look at those statistics, they're incredible. So it's a big part of the economy. Denver doesn't want to strangle itself, and so we really feel that, and really, as we continue to balkanize, will there ever be another statewide transportation funding mechanism? And is that in the best interest of any community if we don't take care of the statewide transportation system? So if the metro area, if the Denver metro area were to do its own transportation thing, I don't think we would be able to pass another statewide, regardless of the revenue source, transportation measure in this state. And I got to tell you, that's not why I'm in this. I'm in this for what I consider as good public policy and in the interest of everybody that lives in this state.
So, Mayor, you commented that you have statewide support. Kind of what does that mean? Because to me, this looks like it's been pretty Denver Metro driven.
I don't think that's fair to say. When you come to the Impact 64 meetings, I think, yeah. So we do have Colorado. We do have a couple of your members at the last couple of meetings, and we have Pueblo comes up. We have, and then we have Progressive 15, Club 20, Action 22, and they'll come with 3 or 4 members, and some of those are either county commissioners or former county commissioners. So we have been up to the North Front Range MPO, and they have heard this presentation and have been in discussions with us. CDOT has been around the state working on this project list. So the metro area has what we call the MTD, which is the Metro Transportation, I forget what, Transportation District or something like that, where we were working on our own local projects because of the size. So it is a statewide effort. To say that there aren't people that still have questions and there are people who are not going to support it, there are still those people out there that we talk to. But it has been a statewide outreach as much as possible to talk to everybody about the effort as well as bring everybody together about what they would see in a Blue Book. And it was important to do that because when we go back out to poll, the polling is going to talk about some of these projects. Because when we talk to the voter, we want them to understand, hey, these are the projects in your local area, or these are possibly statewide projects that would get done, to make sure that they understand what they would be paying for. So I hope that answers part of your question.
We'll take a couple more questions, Mayor Snyder.
So Impact 64, I assume that name is trying to ride on the coattails of Amendment 64?
No.
The intent there? It was my attempt at a joke.
Yeah.
I am so impressed with the new CDOT. And Mr. Hunt, I'm so impressed with the strategic changes you have made there. It gives me great cause for optimism that we're really going to be able to get where we need to get as a state and as a region. And, after hemming and moaning and complaining about if we didn't get any loving out of RAMP, it would be a tough sell. Now that we've gotten considerable loving, I think I'm over that hurdle. You mentioned sales tax is really where you guys have decided that it's the most strategic way to go. For a tourism-based economy like Little Manitou Springs, where 60% of our revenue comes from sales tax, we're a little more sensitive, I think, to the sales tax than others. But and I don't know if there was any consideration given to a property tax or anything along those lines. I didn't see anything in the presentation. But I think we've recognized on this board that we understand that the urbanized areas, the populous counties, need to help subsidize the rural areas and the rest of the state. I guess my only real concern is with the RTD, because, we do keep some abreast of the news up there, and it seems like RTD has found themselves in somewhat of a financial crisis. And it's, I think, a tougher sell for us to think, well, we need to help subsidize the Denver metro area for whatever reason, and I don't know all the details of how they find themselves with a significant shortfall. And so I'm just wondering, if there's a way that we could maybe make that a little more equitable, or how do you help me to sell that here, that, we need to contribute dollars to the Denver metro area?
That's a very fair question. It's often asked. And, my answer to that right now is that at the moment, this is where the consensus is. And I really, as I told MPAC 64 the last meeting we have, I expect after we do the additional round of polling, if it comes back positive, if it doesn't come back positive, we'll just stop working on it. But if it comes back positive, I think what we'll be doing is adjusting the straw man again. And I don't know, but I think there'll be some changes, some little tweaks to percentages, and the transit piece could get smaller. I mean, when the voters look at that, remember when we polled them the first time, we didn't divide this up. And when they look at that, they may say, hey, I like transit, but not for a third. And so I expect some tweaks in that regard to come in. And then if we do start tweaking that, then, some of that percentage will change, and so we'll adjust it going forward based on that.
Yeah. Could I also add that the basic principle on the transit side of this proposition is that sales tax would be largely returned to where it's collected. And for the Denver metro area, it approaches 60%, so they would get back about 60%. You'd try to get that same thing going here in El Paso County, Colorado Springs. On the highway side, though, and I just have to tell you this, metropolitan areas will collect a lot more sales tax than they will get back through this proposition in order to fund the rest of the state highway system. The Denver metro area will contribute close to 60% of the sales tax on the highway side and get back on the order of 40 to 45%. Your contribution in Colorado Springs won't be nearly that big, but as an urban area, it is a fact on the highway side that all of the money would not come back to the county of origin. We have 9,000 miles of highway to support. We have farm-to-market roads. We have oil and gas. We have tourism in this state. We all have to pitch in to make that state system work.
Something my fellow mayors never fail to remind me of, by the way. We don't get all the money back.
Mayor McCafferty?
Yeah, from a rural standpoint, I mean, I understand that, the rural highways are actually lifelines to the metro areas, and the hard sell is going to be the people in the metro areas need to understand that everything that they buy, consume, comes by truck. It no longer, some of it comes by rail, but the majority comes by truck. A gas tax, very unpalatable to voters. I just don't see that working. The sales tax idea, you guys are on the right track. Basically, what you're talking about doing is either doing a series of or a statewide RTA. And that, basically that's what it comes down to. And good luck. I hope you can make it work.
Commissioner Clark?
Well, and I just, I know it's a struggle because there's only so much to go around and it's difficult in our state, but I'd be curious to know what kind of study we did to look at other states in terms of what their sales tax is, because when you start combining, it's not just state sales tax we're talking about. By the time then you add on the local taxes, the lodging taxes, the auto rental taxes, the other, the other components, where is the base of where we're overtaxed on sales tax versus something like a gas tax, which is essentially kind of a sales tax, but it's specifically on gasoline, and or do you look at, and I don't mean to bring up property taxes always is a bad thing to talk about in any community, fixing things like Gallagher, which put a bigger strain on business, and it just, it's a difficult thing you have to deal with, but when you looked at the modeling, did you look at, 1/10 of a cent, 2/10 of a cent? Because there is going to be a breaking point where we can't keep doing this to the people of Colorado. We have to figure out a different way.
Commissioner,
I know it's a hard thing.
Good
I know
points.
you don't have all the answers. I'm not asking for that.
Property tax is not a source we can go to right now until Gallagher is fixed.
Right.
It's just too heavy a burden on commercial property to add this kind of money. So On the sales tax, there's no doubt that when you start to approach 10% total sales tax in any given jurisdiction, it's a sign of trouble. And there are places in Colorado where this 7/10 would bring a local jurisdiction, when you add up all the sales taxes, to just over 10%. And those jurisdictions, like Aspen, are struggling with this. The tricky part is that, of all the states in the union that have a sales tax, Colorado has the lowest state sales tax at 2.9%. There are 7 or 8 states that have no sales tax, but we have the lowest. There's no doubt that sales tax has become the lifeblood of cities to make the cities operate, and the state's kind of gotten shut out of sales tax, and gas tax doesn't work, and we have Gallagher for property. My attitude is this is the best of the worst in terms of the situations. If we're going to make something happen, this is the only way I see something happening in the next year or two, and if this fails, if we can't get there, we have deeper problems in Colorado. So
Maybe I missed it. Was there a sunset clause on
15
this
years.
as well? 15.
I would just want to reiterate that this is not intended to be a fix for transportation funding. It's intended to be a bridge to deal with our problems right now to what we're going to use for transportation funding in the future. And from the polling that we've seen, the voters, we need to do a lot of work with the voter to talk about how we're going to fund transportation in the future. So as Don kind of said, the best of the worst. But I mean, it was never intended to be a new transportation funding system. It is intended to be a bridge to deal with our current problems.
Last comment?
Thanks. A couple responses based on the discussion here. First, and this is just a quick question, has a breakdown or a determination in the straw man proposal been done of which of the various allocation formulas for the city and county revenues will be used?
The current proposal is the Highway Trust Fund formula would be used, the one that's currently in statute.
But there's
second stream.
It's a second stream.
Second stream. It's 22% counties, 18% cities, and it increases city and county revenue by about 50%.
Right.
The trust fund.
And there are different parts of that breakdown by county on different streams. So if we could get
we can do that
breakdown. Thank you. On the issue with that Councilman Knight raised, the challenge that we have is you're talking about a very different RTA then. If you're saying we don't want a state solution to cover state highways, we want to do our RTA, because there's 400 million of the projects on this list that are critical to our community that aren't in the RTA. So you're talking about doing a Pikes Peak RTA project then that doesn't have city and county roads in it in order to approach that level of funding. And so you'd then be talking the next renewal in 2024 and so it doesn't address key components of the transportation structure to say we don't want to do the state thing because we have a Pikes Peak RTA, because somehow we have to address things like Highway 24, 8th Street, Powers Boulevard, and other major state projects that are there. There is some overlap. The Powers extension is one of those. That's why I took that out of the calculation. But the rest of it, if this doesn't go through, if something doesn't go through at the state level, at some point then we say the Pikes Peak RTA becomes mainly funding state highways because those have the major number of passenger miles in our region. And so to his point, Mayor Bach's point, the concern has been we have not always been treated fairly in the past. And you weren't there, and so you've only been there for a couple of years, and you've worked hard to rectify some of that. We see some of that happening right now. But we're going to be looking very closely as a region for those protections, for those guarantees, that we don't get screwed. And just like the Pikes Peak RTA had to spell out things in excruciating detail to make sure that no one got screwed. And Chuck Berry told me he had never seen a ballot question as long as that initial issue that we did for Pikes Peak RTA. And that's what this needs to be, so that voters can be assured that what is promised will get done, because both of you will be gone. There will be other people over the course of this 15-year period. And we've had that challenge on the Pikes Peak RDA board. How do we protect that voter intent? And so the stronger the language we can put in there, the greater the chance of support around the state. And we had, as the person who made that motion that created that first Pikes Peak RDA, Doug Bruce was sitting there making his objections to points, and instead of blowing them off, we addressed things. We fixed things. We stuck in protections so that his points were addressed, and so that the rational voter who looked at it, a majority of them, made the decision to support it. And that's what I'm pushing for here, that we need to have those protections in place, because the best intentions of you, the transportation commissioners, and everybody else go out the window when there's someone else there.
So are you suggesting that we invite Mr. Bruce in on the drafting committee?
Not on the drafting committee, but I am saying you ought to listen to every objection that's made and say,
excellent point.
how do we
Clerk
write
and
this
recorder.
to address that? So
Excellent
we have
point.
a 1% administrative limit in Pikes Peak RTA because people said it would all go to administration. So we wrote it in. And people raised this objection. So we wrote it in. And the more we do that, the better shape we're going to be.
Gentlemen, any...
I would like one last statement, if I could. I just wanted to bring you up to date on the northeastern Colorado flood recovery. First, I'll say that we still have a challenge on US 24, Manitou Springs, Waldo Canyon. We're trying to stick with that. The commission appropriated additional money beyond the drainage improvement money to help us with a warning system for the city for US 24, and we'll continue to work on that. Tom will continue to work on that. Doug's back here. Could be.
I think so.
Could be. But just some good news on we have a long ways to go in northern Colorado, but from a CDOT point of view, on September 18th, 3 days after it stopped raining, we said we don't have a choice. We have 27 closed highways, 240 miles. How do you pick and choose? We're going to open them all by December 1st. As of today, we have 25 open and 2 to go, and those 2 are going to be open by December 1st as well. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Executive Director. Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate you both coming down and taking more slings and arrows.
Very helpful. Appreciate the candid comments, really do. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll be taking a break shortly, but I think we can get through some of these fairly quickly here. 7B, state stack agenda. Anything exciting there?
I think you've covered the majority of the things we're going to be talking about at STAC just in Director Hunt's presentation. So the budget is a formal action item, but it's a maintenance budget. And so RAMP adds to that. RAMP was approved by STAC and the Transportation Commission at the last meetings, and so things look good, and the projects can begin making that progress. So if there are any questions on items on here, I'm happy to answer them.
Okay. Questions on the STAC agenda? Thanks, Wayne. Item number 8, communication items. Anything there beyond what's published? Moving to member entity announcements. Anything for the good of the Commonweal here? Mayor McCafferty.
Nothing more than the documents I gave you earlier on the Golden West project. It's a new wind project. It's actually not a new wind project. It's a project that Clipper Wind started investing in over 5 years ago. It's now been bought out by Golden West, and they should be looking for permitting at the county level shortly. For us, it's a big benefit. 100 to 300 jobs over an 18-month construction period. All the land leases and everything have already been secured. It's just a matter of coming in. They've got the money to pick the project up and running.
Okay,
So I think it's a good thing.
thanks. Meeting schedule, you have that. Which brings us to item number 11, executive session. Let me read this into the record. In accordance with Colorado Open Meetings Act, 24-6-401 plus, the board in open session is to determine whether to hold an executive session to discuss personnel matter regarding the annual evaluation of the executive director. Chair will poll the board members, and upon consent of two-thirds of the members present, may hold a closed executive session. If the consent of the executive session is not given, the item may be discussed in open session or withdrawn from consideration. Also in there is, Rob McDonald has the option to say, no, I want this in open session. So let me go there first, because you could eliminate all of this if you...
No, I think tradition has been better discussion in closed session.
Okay. That being the case, do we have a motion to go into executive session for the purposes read into the record? So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We will convene an executive session in about 10 minutes in this room.